Welcome to the Dow of Sports podcast with Troy Kirby, covering sports business with over 300 industry leaders from across the globe. Now, here is your host, Troy Kirby.
Thank you for listening to the Dow of Sports podcast. I'm Troy Kirby, along with episode 882 of the podcast. Today's guest, Rob Yowell. Now, here's the greatest thing that I can say about somebody such as Rob Yowell. He's not only a person that is great at sales, he's also an educator. I think that's an important thing. Now, I'm teaching right now at St. Martin's University. We're starting up a sport management minor, really kind of building that into a business degree. And Rob's been doing it for a while, especially in the sport law part of Arizona State University. I think it's great, especially when you can get that hands-on approach to somebody who's dealing with name rights, sponsorship rights, all of those kinds of things, as well as tourism. We don't talk enough about the tourism side of the sports tourism landscape of bringing things to the greater Phoenix area, which Rob Yowell does, or any other. And really, those are huge players within that market. Rob does a great job really talking about that. I do bring up his San Antonio Talons days for the arena football, and whether or not we could actually see teams actually be named as products. You never know. Instead of using the city name or even the team name, now it becomes a product name. Everything might be up for sale. People didn't think that it would work with stadiums, and it seemed to. Great conversation with Rob Yowell right here on episode 882 of the Dow of Sports. Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I guess the origins of your, kind of role as what you do now really kind of remind me of the outrage that people had when 3Com took over a Candlestick, right? Because that was the first one that we ever heard of. I mean, maybe there might have been some naming rights, but that was the one, and people said this is never going to happen. And now, if you even have a stadium in both college and the pros, naming rights are it, right? You're not going to get away from it.
It's the first part of the conversation. Troy, first of all, thank you for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience. And going back to the origin of naming rights, I mean, it's been around. It was called building entitlement. We've seen names on buildings, for centuries, but it's always been a dignitary, a famous general, maybe a player, president of a university, and the Wrigley Field was named after the Wrigley family that named gum, but it wasn't a branding play back then.
Yeah.
Now it's a much different type of situation, very, very commercially driven. And to your point, you can't have a conversation about a stadium, an arena, a venue of some sort without having naming rights somewhere in that line item of how do we pay for this, or are we going to identify a naming rights partner for a building. So it is part of the ether. You and I are in that space. A lot of your listeners probably haven't grown up in a world where they haven't gone to a stadium with a corporate name on it. You and I probably went to a few back in our day. But
the Murph. Jack Murphy was named after a sports writer. It had nothing to do with it.
They all had names, right? They had names, but they, like I said, it was Cleveland Browns Stadium. It was RFK. They were named after people, but no one was writing a check for it. Now it is a huge line item. No different than you can't start a soccer club and not put the name of there's a brand on the front. Now we're watching our NBA teams and Major League Baseball teams and hockey teams putting stickers on helmets and brands on sleeves. The NFL is the only one that's managed to hold out. But commercial assets, commercial branding is very much integrated into the day-to-day life of sports business, and so we're right on the forefront of it.
Is that really something that colleges have finally started getting into? Because if you look at colleges, right, I think it was Louisville was really the first one that had the KFC Center or whatever machination that was. There were a lot of them that maybe played in arenas that had names on them, but it wasn't their home arena. And that started, and isn't that more of the bureaucracy of getting up to that provost and VP and board of trustee level that you don't have maybe in pro sports? that bureaucracy exists.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think as college athletics has become more sophisticated, obviously we've watched it evolve. Certainly, as with players now, being able to take advantage of name, image, and likeness. But on a college campus, a lot of those types of naming opportunities were donor based. You put your family name on a library, put your family name on a new theater. When it got to sports, obviously there's third-party rights holders, the Learfields, the Playflies of the world, that have bought those rights. They haven't bought naming rights, but they've bought the branding and media rights for opportunities. So to go into, I'm a Duke alum, so I'll use our examples of Cameron Indoor Stadium and Wallace Wade Stadium as our football and basketball facilities. Those are names of former coaches that have coached there. And at no point has it ever come up to we're going to put a name on these places. But as new buildings are built on campus, I think Ohio State was one that started. You start putting names on floors, buildings. Start carrying. I think it's Value City now at Ohio State. But the Big House at Michigan, those are legendary venues that aren't going to see names on them, but what you are seeing is you're seeing names of courts being offered up. A new facility on a campus could certainly be branded, but there's typically a connection with the university in some way, shape, or form, or certainly the region where that is. But yes, as you get into college, there are some other checks and balances that need to get into place. Certainly on the educational side, but it's also how some of those deals get done. We worked with LSU on looking at naming rights for several of their facilities, and the power not only from an athletic side, but to be able to take a brand and cross over the street to the educational side and offer up banking services or what sheets are going to be on the beds of the dorms, what light bulbs are screwed into the classrooms. All of those types of things are business opportunities that a college campus delivers in spades, as opposed to a professional venue, which is really just what happens on site at that venue for that day. They each have their unique qualities, but yes, a few more speed bumps to go through when you're having a conversation on a college campus than when you're dealing with a professional organization.
What are the barriers and limits that naming rights have at this point when it comes to the actual affiliation? In Washington State, marijuana is legal. In Colorado, California, can that necessarily still be a barrier even in those states that you're not going to see them even go that far because of the quote-unquote family-friendly? And is that a barrier that crypto has somewhat taken away from? It's still kind of there. I wouldn't put it in the no man's land level, right? Yeah. We're not talking adult entertainment or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. No, there's obviously banned categories. You don't see. Obviously we don't see tobacco. We don't see. Certainly we don't see gambling at the collegiate level. We've obviously seen that infiltrate at the professional level here in the U.S. now. But as it relates to to cannabis and things like that, we work with companies that are wanting to get involved in sports, and they do. And there are certain levels depending on obviously a collegiate platform is not going to permit it. There are professional platforms that do take cannabis sponsorships. Some of them are your kind of tier 2, tier 3 leagues. You probably won't see NFL and NBA and doing those types of deals, and if they do, they're probably removed from the playing field and things like that. But again, the barriers of entry are really going to be in a lot of instances are really common sense driven. I mean, you mentioned crypto, and we still see crypto.com. Obviously have the naming rights in Los Angeles. They have the jersey patch deal with Philadelphia, and they're on the front of every the entry in UFC. Everybody walks out with a crypto.com shirt on, and so there are certain levels where that category is still playing. The U.S. is a regulated market, and so you tend to see a lot more of that money spent internationally, but it's still very very prominent here. It's just a matter at the end of the day, if you're going to spend the money at the level that some of these deals require, you want to be able to gain business on the other side of it. And so if there is restriction to your business, it doesn't make sense to spend at a high level, but if you want to keep brand awareness, you find a place. And I think, as we mentioned, we work with a client that took a very prominent position in the early stages of crypto arriving in the U.S. And they are taking a step down here in the U.S., but still maintaining their interest and at a high level, internationally. So, I think case by case, city by city, sport by sport, pro versus college, and obviously even down into high school. But there's high school athletics that are very lucrative, opportunities. Playfly is a company that operates on multimedia rights levels for not only the collegiate level, but they work with state federations and help states like ours here in Arizona sell the rights to their football championships and their basketball championships, and use that money to create better opportunities for the student athletes that participate here at the high school level, but also to provide opportunities for young journalists and young future sports business facility operators that want to get involved at levels and be involved in this business at other levels, and utilizing sponsorship to get down to mom and dad on Friday night lights and Saturdays. We just had our high school basketball championships impact a 20,000 seat arena with the men's and women's championships. So, moms and dads are very involved in what their kids are doing at the high school level. And so that, it's a very attractive opportunity for brands, even down to the high school. And obviously you get more specific on what you can and can't do, the lower you get in your properties. But we find a lot of really exciting opportunities could start at a high school level that ultimately grow into that brand, being a sponsor of an NFL franchise, or maybe even doing a naming rights deal in their hometown because they cut their teeth, working in high school or college, second tier opportunities to understand how, what works best for their brand, and then take that leap. Because what you don't want to see, Troy, is we've seen brands get really excited, and you mentioned, we were talking before getting on the air about kind of the early days of naming rights, the .coms that got on and that were there for a minute and they were gone. Well, they were flush with cash, but they didn't understand their business model and how to sustain it. They spent money and burned through it, and we don't want to see sponsors come in to sports in general spend money the wrong way or on the wrong property or go about it the wrong way, and then have this bad taste in their mouth, like, that didn't work for us. Well, it didn't. It's not that it didn't work. It's that you were in the wrong place. You didn't get the right advice. So always, I would much rather make sure a brand does the right deal out of the gate than the most expensive deal. And the world that we're in, we've got to understand, our expertise and our understanding. In some cases, we may direct a brand or a property away from the thing they think they want to do. We've got to tell them what we feel is best and why. And a naming rights deal may look real sexy, but the best deal for that brand may be an official partner first. Get your arms around this. Understand how to work, and understand that every dollar you spend on sponsorship, you're going to need to spend another $1 or maybe $1.50 to activate that sponsorship for it to work. Because it's just not put a logo on and everybody says, okay, I'm going to go buy your stuff. Give them a reason. Take those marks and those rights that you've purchased through a sponsorship. Activate them in retail if that's your platform. Activate them in your advertising. Utilize it to excite your customer base, or in some cases your employee base, to support that team and give them that sense of pride. Help them make it a successful partnership. Not just like, hey, we're a .com and we're just going to put our name out there and everybody's just going to go to our site and all of a sudden we're going to get all this traffic and everybody's just going to give us money. Doesn't work that way. And we saw some of those early ones. They were here for a minute and they were gone, shortly thereafter.
One of the things that transitions is, I guess, attitudes. Back in the day, I still call it the Winston Cup, right? That was what ran NASCAR. You won the Winston Cup, great. And then about 30 years ago, they said, sorry, you mentioned tobacco. Do you also have that sensibility towards also deep diving into the brand to make sure that what they support or what they are not necessarily supportive of, whether that be LGBTQ rights or whatever, maybe they're just not into that stuff, that they actually, kind of marry with the brand, but also that the teams or the arena actually understand what they're getting into from that side? Because it's great to take a check, but, I think there's a comedian, Tim Dillon, talks about now IHOP has to have a brand statement towards what they support and what they don't support, even though it's just pancakes, right?
Absolutely. And if you remember, they kind of played a joke on everybody and said they were going to be the International House of Burgers, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "You're a pancake joint." What do you mean you're doing burgers? I mean, it was a fun way of saying, like, we do actually have more than pancakes on our menu, but it was a fun way of trying to, to your point, understand that when you do a sponsorship and you want to, and certainly if you're on the buy side or the sell side, understand that the brands need to align with your objectives as well as the property. And if you want to, if there's going to be companies that come to you and say, I want to sponsor the New York Yankees because, my brand will be all over the world, or I want to I want to sponsor the LA Dodgers because I really want to grow my business in Japan, because now you've got two of the top Japanese players, and we know there's eyeballs on your team. But if that brand doesn't align with the philosophy of the club or the league, or in some cases maybe some of the players on your team, it gets down to a point of you need to understand, research the companies that you're working with. Certainly ownership may have opinions on who they want to work with, and there have been cases when we've worked with teams and brands or teams, to go on a sponsorship search, whether it be naming rights or a premium asset. We have had categories eliminated for beyond just the obvious, because either there was an existing relationship with the club or ownership that kind of prohibited for us from going down that category, or in some cases, there were specific companies, bad relationship, or didn't philosophically align with their global warming opinion, or hey, we don't want to work with oil companies because we're a clean energy organization. This is our philosophy. So again, it's a case by case, and you need and as a seller or as a consultant on a brand side, you need to fully understand what the objectives are of your organization when you're going out. Obviously, first and foremost, you want to get a great partner, one that can afford the asset, and that's going to be with you for a long time. But at the same time, you also need to understand that, are we aligning with a brand that aligns with us, that aligns with our league, aligns with our fan base. You don't want to. We've watched this, unfortunately play out with what Bud Light has had to deal with, and they're trying to get back into good graces. They obviously are spending a lot in sport, and I think there was sometimes you miscalculate, and it happens. I mean, you got to get through it, you got to get over it, but if you can, certainly be proactive and understanding. There's not a company. There's companies that we've called and they've met the profile, but when presented to the client, they're like, yeah, that's their positioning doesn't align with us today.
Well, poor Dylan just wanted a beer, but the other thing is they didn't actually have a sponsorship. That's one of the things that actually gets misread about that. They had just sent cans to Dylan, right, that had her face on it. That was it, and she did it because they thought they were going to get some social media traction.
Right.
Is that part of the other issue that you're now having to deal with? You mentioned college. Mm-hmm. all it takes is one wacky college student who happens to put something on, and now you've changed, whether it's Duke basketball, whatever. And because of the fact that a lot of them, they might have, because of the NAIA deal, they might have some semblance of it, but they're necessarily going to be on track with what you're selling for a naming right or what you're selling for a sponsorship.
Yeah, I mean, the Bud Light situation was not a designed, brand campaign, something that they wrote a check and said, hey, I'm doing this. Unlike what they're doing with Shane Gillis, and they're sponsoring his tour, and they're like, we need to align ourselves with you.
But that means that somebody had approved Shane.
So
nobody had actually approved it. Somebody
Correct.
just designed a can.
A marketing executive thought this was a really good idea, maybe a way to get some free social media, leverage in a platform that was very important to her, and it backfired on a brand, and it backfired massively, right? Because social media is
corrosive.
And it can work both ways.
Yeah,
it can. You can become all of a sudden a TikTok sensation or an Instagram sensation in a minute with a really cool viral video, or it can go the other way and it can, trash a legacy brand in the way and understanding that it is powerful, because it's something that I go through when I'm teaching my class, and we go through the process of what's included in naming rights deals and go through the various categories, and I show them some of the deals that I've done in the past, and I compare, when we were doing deals in 2005, social media, Twitter and all that stuff didn't exist. I mean, the internet did. So we had web banners and things of that nature. And now digital media is a main proponent of naming rights deals and being able to to have assets on that and be part of a digital media presentation for a team or a property. And it's just in 2005, Troy, wasn't that long ago. It's hard. It's amazing to see how quickly that is, but not how quickly it's changed, because technology is always changing, but how powerful it became so quickly, and we've seen it work, both ways, and so when we talk about understanding brands, and when you do a deal, I mean we even when deals get announced, you sign a player, there's hundreds of thousands of armchair, or we call them keyboard GMs, that are out there that are going to comment on the guy you signed, or the guy you didn't draft, or the player that you keep playing, and I don't like that guy because he's not on my or he's on my opponent's fantasy team. Quit playing him. Play my guy, kind of thing. I mean, but it's given the fan audience a voice, and that voice at the end of the day is very powerful, because they're the ones that are buying your merchandise. They're the ones that are buying tickets. They're the ones that are watching. They're the ones who your advertisers are trying to get to, and really since COVID has become a very big focus of all sports properties, they realized that when they didn't have people in the stands, there were still people watching. And you can put 20,000 people in an arena, but when 3 million people are watching Caitlin Clark play basketball, and only 16,000 are in Carver Hawkeye Arena, University of Iowa has 3 million eyeballs that they like. How am I going to engage them? How do I get them to buy more merchandise? And it's through not only just the TV, but it's through the social media component. So it's interacting outside of game day has become and because game day is maybe twice a week. In the NFL, it's once a week. In other leagues, you may have 3 or 4, baseball games a week. So frequency of interacting with your fan base is now, is 24/7, 365. Given in this world of social media, I don't have to wait to game day to talk to my fans or wait for a broadcast. I can talk to them anytime, because they're opted in. They're following us on a site. They're opted into our app. They're involved with us in so many other ways. And that value and that connection is something that more and more teams and more properties are trying to get their arms around and trying to perfect. And it's this next generation of sports business executive that you and I get a chance to talk to early on in their careers and maybe in their educational part of that. They're the ones that are going to take this to the next level. I share with the kids in my class or the young adults in my class that you start my class as a student, you're going to finish my class as a colleague, and when you graduate, I hope to work with you because there's things that you know better than I do. There's things that I've done that you haven't done yet, but the business that I'm in now is going to be much more your business in 5 years than it will be mine. And so I want to make sure that I'm putting, the right, future executives into our business. The old professor would like a phone call or a consulting gig every once in a while too. But but in all honesty, this industry is theirs. We're just, 30 years ago, I was in that seat. And I was talking to those executives that would come in to speak to our class, and they'd share with us what's happening now, and it was fascinating, and it's fun to look back 30 years later and see all the deals that I've been a part of, but also as I sit there with these young, bright, talented, smart, future executives, and I'm watching our industry change, really on a daily basis. They're the ones that are going to be, grabbing this baton and taking it forward. So I'm excited to see where this business goes. But technology and the tertiary part of sports will always remain the same. It's how it's being distributed and how it's being consumed that is constantly evolving. And these young, smart future executives are the ones that are going to come in with great ideas and think about, naming rights was only no one ever thought someone would write a check to put a name on a stadium, 30, 50 years ago. And now it's, to your point, you can't have a conversation about building a stadium without, who's your naming rights partner?
So I come back to that, rewind the clock about, 15 years? You were president of the San Antonio Talons. Arena football, which was upstart from 88,
yeah,
had lasted a while. Do we see it to where now minor league teams or minor league outfits are going to start using naming rights as a way to supplement the fact of whether or not they can support a team, quote unquote?
Well, as with anything, naming rights. The naming rights typically lies in the rights holder of the building, and arena football teams are typically tenants. But what they do have is they have the ability to sell the naming rights of the field they play on. They obviously have the rights to sell sponsorship patches on the jerseys that their game jerseys. And yes, look, sponsorship is very important. We work with several of the our venue down in Tucson is the home of the Sugar Skulls. So we work closely with that organization as we're selling the naming rights to incorporate assets within that franchise.
But that also means the San Antonio Talons would be the San Antonio Dunk Kings. I don't know. Can it get that far?
It could if the league was allowing naming rights of the team.
Yeah.
We've seen that with Red Bull, right? Red Bull has acquired numerous soccer clubs in countries. They have a very successful Formula One team that carries their name. So yeah, you could see branded teams in sports where that is permitted. I think that could arena football and arena football or minor league sports could be this space where instead of it being the name of the city, could it be like, hey, I'm in New Orleans and I'm playing for the Beau Rivage, Shuckers kind of thing, and Beau Rivage being a casino down there, and they play in a stadium right next to the whatever, that could be a thing. If someone is willing to write the check for it, and a league is permitted, and it doesn't really confuse things or get too off the rails, I'm sure it'll be done. It's a very interesting idea, and I'm sure there are lots of conversations that happen like this in bars, in dorm rooms, and in conference rooms when you and I are we're sitting in the lobby of a conference. There's a lot of offline conversations that have what if, would you be interested in this? Or I'm talking to a brand saying, what is something outside the box that you really think your brand would do? Not typical, or maybe it's a sport, or it's an activity. I mean, I've lived here in Phoenix since 2006. Pickleball was big here when I moved here, but pickleball was never thought of as a professional sport. It was an activity, and now it is big business. It's on ESPN. We've got primetime shows. We've got John McEnroe and Steffi Graf playing against Andre Agassi and and Andy Roddick and all this kind of. I mean, all of a sudden, pickleball's become a business.
Well, I'll tell you, I was even on a local parks board for 7 years, and if there is one thing I know, you don't mess with pickleball. You could destroy tennis courts. You even look at pickleball, and if that doesn't tell you the fervor that's kind of growing, and while it's an older group that's doing it, maybe 45 to 55 and starting to get up there, they tend to have the eyeballs, but also the resources. And isn't that a part of whether it's naming rights or anything, you got to have the resources. And I don't know and I'm not bashing on Gen Z or even the millennials, but I don't know if they have the resources of Gen X or the baby boomers at this point.
Right. Yes. I mean, obviously, a demographic that you're trying to reach, depending on your brand. If you're an automotive company, you're trying to reach people that can buy cars. If you're an energy drink brand, then you're trying to get a college student that just needs the boost, right? And so, depending on the price point of your product and who you're trying to get to, yes. And pickleball has been typically a mature sport, right? And so, typically mature people have been in their careers. They have disposable income and they're spending money. But but the growth in pickleball has been, it's moved down into that, into the 20s and 30s. It's become professional. You've got actual, athletes out there playing, this sport. We've got, 3 or 4 facilities that have been built here. We've had all the major organizations fly in, using that pun, fly in here and bring major tournaments to these facilities. And so you've got these age brackets, and you've got young and old playing this sport. And so it's one that its growth has, because it no longer became a you got to be the old fart
and
playing it.
Isn't that the transition also with golf? I know that people like to beat up on Live Golf, but one of the things that actually realized was, hey, we've got to actually attract younger people too.
Be cool. Yeah.
And isn't that where the sponsorships have actually changed as well? Because you see a lot younger sponsorships or a lot of younger format, to where if I go rewind the clock, even during Tiger's reign, it was not really young people's forte, and now it's starting to get there, right?
Yeah, well, it's become cool. I mean, and we're here in Phoenix, and we're known for probably the coolest hole in golf. The 16th hole at the Waste Management Open, and that's something that Live Golf has kind of embraced everywhere. Now, that's something that's unique to the PGA Tour here when you play in Arizona. Obviously, in a couple of weeks when you go down to Augusta, it is not that way. And it's not that way in most places. But Live Golf has a party hole at every course. I mean, they have their, quote, 16th hole feeling, all day, every day on the course. So wherever we play, or they play, it's like, it's fun. And their players embrace that. They're playing in shorts. They're not. They're playing. Their caddies are having a good time, and it's just a different approach, right? And it's definitely a younger audience.
So when I've taught any standard business class, I always tell them to work their store. You got to actually know what you're doing. Isn't that part of the sponsorship stuff? You actually got to know. You actually got to work. Like if you're gonna do the 16th hole, you actually got to know what the 16th hole is. If you've actually got to, great, you sell a sponsorship, I sell a sign. Is that really what, what I mean? Not just what the sponsor needs, but you actually know what that is.
Yeah.
You actually know beyond just, I turned and burned it.
That's right. I mean, yeah. I mean, whatever property you're selling, you got to understand it. You got to understand how to activate it. You got to understand that if you are bringing a sponsor into it, it's much more than selling that deal, putting the sign up, and saying, okay, now it's up to you. It's a two-way street, and successful partnerships are ones that are mutually beneficial. You've researched the sponsor. You've figured out how they're going to integrate into your operation, whether it's an event, property, whatever. And you want to make it a win-win, and those are how those those deals are bad deals are made all the time because people salespeople get lazy or brands get lazy and they think that there's not once they decide they want to sponsor something, then that's it. There's a lot of work that goes into a campaign, an advertising, supporting it. As I mentioned before, for every dollar you spend on sponsorship, a brand needs to spend, another buck or two, to activate it, to let people know that I am a sponsor, because it's not the team's job to say, hey, you're a sponsor, other than what they're contractually obligated to on their media or putting your sign up or whatever. It's your job as the brand to say, I've got the rights to the Chicago Bulls, and go out into the Chicago, DMA and say, I'm a Bull sponsor, putting up your advertising and creating a retail program or putting it on your packaging on products in stores, whatever that is. I mean, that takes time, takes planning, and it also takes coordination with that team. Hey, I want to have 4 players for a photo shoot. Well, how do I get them? What's their off day? Where are we going to do the shoot? Can these guys remember? Can these guys articulate the lines? Do they like the brand? Because we went back before, like if I'm a meat company, if I'm a steak company or a steakhouse, and I've sponsored a team, and one of the players doesn't eat meat, that doesn't make sense, right? But you got to understand that. I mean, and that's
that is
an example of.
But that is perfect, because you have people that will say, "Hey, blah blah blah," and they stick somebody's face at it, and this just so happens to be the antithesis of your brand, and this comes out later in social media.
That's right.
And then it burns every goodwill you ever had towards it, as well as anybody else looking at it.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that as we start looking at NIL deals that are coming into play in the college level, and it's one of these things that the athlete, if the athlete doesn't use the product, why would you endorse it? And that's one of those things where be authentic when you're doing a partnership, be authentic when you're doing an endorsement, and those are things that need to it sounds simple, Troy, but there are times when people blindly send a can to someone that doesn't represent their brand, and then shit happens. Sorry,
No,
but and that's one of the things that in this world, someone wakes up and has one of those moments. You're like, wow, I'd like to have that one back.
So let's talk about attraction. You were on the tourism board for a long time around here.
Yes.
Explain to me what it is that people do not fundamentally understand about bringing people to an area, having them plop down $500 million impact and leaving, why that's a bad thing. And, people act like somehow this is just like the glorified parks department. And here, a lot of times it's the best fundraising you can ever do.
Well, I spent 12 years on the Phoenix Regional Sports Commission Board, and have worked with lots of other economic impact organizations, not only here in Arizona, but in markets like Los Angeles and Las Vegas. It's first of all, we're a destination market, we're a tourism market, and so that's obviously key for us. Putting heads in beds, as they say, is helps drive the economy here for us. We sell sunshine, and we're enjoying some of that today. We do attract. We have all 5. We have 5 major sports franchises. We host 2 bowl games. We're on the Super Bowl rotation. We have NASCAR. We have PGA. We have all kinds of conferences that come down here. They come down here for the weather, and it's a big deal. And we host. We've got the Final Four coming here, and those. And you see those numbers at the end of when a Super Bowl was here, 2 years ago, and when, if a World Cup was coming to your city, what economic impact? What does that mean? And people are like, people come into town, they spend money, right? Yeah, but we're bringing 300,000, 400,000 people into a market. They're spending couple $100 a night in a hotel, and there's taxes and buildings are getting paid, arenas are getting paid for by the taxes on hotel tax and rental car tax, and local businesses are, restaurants and, are having people eating in them, and all of those things. And yes, we've got, 5 million people that live in our DMA, but we all live here, and we live our lives, and we spend our money at our grocery store, we buy our gas, we pay our taxes. But on those weekends when Super Bowl shows up and, hotel rooms go from $100 a night to 500, 600, I'm being somewhat conservative. That's money from other parts of the world that are coming into this market in that weekend. And, you see, $1 billion economic impacts into a market like ours, or to a city, Las Vegas a couple weeks ago when they had Formula One, when they've had, they have an event every week. I mean, they're built for that.
But do they even Las Vegas and even Phoenix, do they really understand? Because you get the locals that are NIMBY, and the idea is they don't realize that this is what makes all of their other taxes lower.
Right. Well, I think some people do. I think people have become a little bit more educated, because I think it's presented to them in a much better way. Where you see it have some negative impact is, when Formula One coming to Las Vegas shut down the Strip with construction for months at a time, and then when it happened, the same people that thought they were going to, get an uptick in their business didn't, because, all of a sudden you couldn't get to their business because they were on the Strip, and the Strip was, they put a big wall in front of them, and you couldn't actually go, you didn't want to go into this restaurant because you thought it was going to be, courtside, if you will, track side, and you were, there was no reason to go. Well, one, you couldn't get there, and two, why would you go there and pay $1,500 to sit in a coffee shop and watch a race that you couldn't even watch anyway? There were some, you got to think through it a little bit. And certainly, as someone who would sell something like this through to a committee to say, hey, it's worth for us putting up the $25 million bid to get a Final Four, or to obviously it's more than that for a Super Bowl. But I mean, to go into that process and make a commitment financially and know that we can pay it based on who it's going to attract, the money it's going to drive into our economy, so that we can turn around and share that revenue back with the property of the event. And obviously they want to make sure that we've got hotels and we've got the infrastructure to host it, or in some cases, why we build a new facility in our market and in other markets. Hey, we needed an indoor facility here in Arizona. We had a Super Bowl in Sun Devil Stadium in '95, and the Cardinals wanted a better venue. They were sharing that with ASU. They wanted their own venue. They wanted a covered facility. It gets hot here in the summer, and so
no kidding.
Yeah, as you know. But for us to be able to host, events, in the summer in that facility, whether it's basketball, whether it's soccer game, to be able to go into a controlled environment is critical. I mean, it's been critical in Las Vegas, for them to get a bowl game, to now get Super Bowls, to get the college football championship, to get the Pac-12 championship, all those types of things. To play those games in December in a market that would be, it'd be 30 degrees out there. People were like, I'm not going up there for then. There's times you want to go to Vegas, and you can go to Vegas in December and have a great time. You're just not sitting out by a pool. But facilities are built through economic impact, driven by sports commission organizations that are bringing events into cities to put people in hotels, which are businesses, local businesses at some level, that are generating economic impact and revenue, to restaurants and bars and other businesses that are in a marketplace. It's a boost. And there's everyday business, and then there's event business, and we see that here quite a bit. And it's kind of fascinating to kind of sit in a room and hear some of the dynamics. hey, I represent Glendale, or I represent the East Valley, or I represent the downtown. And so where do we play something? Does it go out in Desert Diamond Arena? Does it play in Footprint? All right, we've got a really nice, we've got a couple nice venues that Arizona State has with Desert Financial and the Mullet Center. What are we going to bid on? What facilities can we put into play? We've got 12 spring training facilities, and we've got Chase Field, so we could host baseball tournaments. And obviously spring training is going on right now. We've got 12 MLB franchises that come here and play. We got one that sticks around, it's our home team, but it's a very unique and cool place, and obviously buildings were built for that purpose, and they're used for a month out of the year for spring training. But how do you activate them on the other times of the year? And so we're going out and calling the Big Ten, calling some of the northern conferences that are playing in the snow right now, and hey, come on down here and play your spring ball down here. As soon as these guys leave, at the end of this month, they start playing their Major League Baseball. We've got 12 facilities down here, and it's still snowing in Nebraska, and it's snowing in Michigan, and snowing in Vermont.
I'm always shocked that nobody decides to bid on the College World Series. You have 7 facilities? You would be able to handle all of the stuff, and plus, no offense to Nebraska. Yep. Or Omaha, but it's a little different if all of a sudden you're in, a place to where you can find enough hotels, you can find enough stuff, and your airport. Let's be honest, Sky Harbor is a lot easier to get into.
Yeah, and ironically, I worked on that project, the new field in Omaha, and the softball and men's baseball are the only 2 championships that are actually played in the same place every year. They're permanent facilities. And Omaha had to make a choice. They were going to lose. The NCAA was going to put it on bid, to your point, if they didn't build them a new stadium. And so the whole reason that the new stadium was built in Omaha was to keep the College World Series for the next 20 years and get the NCAA to commit. Because they needed, Rosenblatt was a legendary, awesome place, but it was a barn, and it was amenities were low, and you had options to come to nicer weather, and they made a commitment to build that. So, but to your point is that yes, we have gone to we host several of the major baseball. I think we're hosting like the Big Ten tournament, or we'll host the Big 12 or Big West we've had down here.
Whatever becomes of the Pac-12.
Whatever, the Pac-2, whatever. But yeah, to be able to host an event down here, whether it be a conference tournament, or in a lot of cases, it's just you create an opportunity for teams that are playing in cold weather to come down here in March and April and play 10, 12 games, and really they can stay in one hotel. We can create a home environment for them, just like we do with the spring training teams. They can be based out of Salt River Fields. They can be based out of Camelback. They can be based Arizona State took over Phoenix Municipal, but we can create this scenario to where 20 teams can come down here and play quality competition, great weather, not have bats getting broken and guys pulling hamstrings and games getting snowed out. I always laugh about this when we get to opening day in Major League Baseball and they're playing a game in Cleveland.
Oh,
and it's snowing.
Detroit. Yeah, right behind home plate, and it's like a $12 ticket because nobody wants to be out. By the way, I don't even know who pays $12, but it's like minus 5 degrees.
Yeah, and it's opening day. Opening day should be in either in a controlled environment or in a southern market, because you want that. Opening day in baseball is kind of one of those days you want to experience. If that's your team, you want to go there. You want to be part of that, and to have it sleeting, snowing. I watched an MLS game get played in Utah the other day. They sent the LA Galaxy up to play a game in Utah, and it was snowing. And I'm like, would they do that to Messi? Probably not. They'd call that game off if it was Messi. But, it's not that hard to figure out that the weather in Florida in April is going to be a little bit better than the weather in Michigan. Just, I'm not a weatherman, but I'm just using my brain here. But I always kind of chuckle at that.
So as we're talking about transitions, what is the state of sport education when it comes to management or law or any of the stuff? Because let's be honest, you're part of the Ohio Mafia. Ohio U.
I am, yeah.
You got your master's degree there, and Jim Kaler was kind of an outlier because he only had a master's degree. I like Jim, don't get me wrong, but it's like that was not considered enough. And you had all these people that were making these sport management kids do dioramas and crap that really, to me, didn't really resonate. Are they starting to listen? Are education programs starting to go, you know what, if you don't have the PhD but you actually know what you're doing? Because I've noticed it's not just myself, but you and other people are starting to be able to say, hey, there's actually more out here that we can show these kids. I'm much more on, working on, not only concession items, but also tangible stuff like, how sales are and ticket sales, but also you got to network at conferences. You got to do all that stuff. I never heard that even 15 years ago. It seems like it just came out because of the 2020 pandemic, that all of a sudden schools got scared. They might not know what they're talking about.
Well, a couple things. I mean, is that, when I was at Ohio University 32 years ago, seems hard to say, but that's the facts, is that, first of all, this wasn't the industry then that it is now. And I remember being in Athens, Ohio in the winter going, it was, my choices at that point were Athens, Ohio, Amherst, Massachusetts, and I think West Virginia. Morgantown had just started. Dallas Branch had just started the program there, and
a lot of them were tied to kinesiology.
Right. They were sports. Sports only in name, but you were stuck in the kinesiology department, and it was more recreational, right? And the evolution was, why do I have to come to Athens, Ohio to learn about the business of sport? Why isn't this in, Dallas, Texas? Why isn't this in Phoenix, Arizona? I'd much rather, go to. We had Gene Smith when he was, came up to speak to us, and he was showing us all the facilities and all the sunshine of Tempe, Arizona. I'm like, why don't you have this program? I'd go there.
Which is, by the way, he came up in facilities. I love Gene. I used to see him at NACDA all the time.
And so the point is that the business grew, and then you get schools that recognize that you can get another. God, we have 80 to 100 students in the program here at ASU and in the law school, and it's a very valuable degree today because sports has become big business at all levels. And to your point, when I was taking those classes and they were trying to teach you sports out of a textbook, which doesn't compute with me anymore because it changes so quickly. And we were doing recruiting, profiles, and so it was much more. What were the opportunities that a sports management degree was going to afford you moving forward? Are you gonna go into player operations? Were you going to go into, college athletics? And then, and your role in sports, you were going to be in ticketing? Were you going to be in sales? Were you going to be in, were you going to be on the coaching side of it? And obviously the bandwidth of sports has changed. I mean, it's broadcasting, it's technology, it's facility management. There's so many different buckets of it, and the programs got smart. And to your point, I've been involved in teaching, teaching classes. When I was in Los Angeles, I'd go up to San Francisco. I'd go up to Ohio. I'd go out to a couple different other schools. Oregon had a great program, but they were all on the cutting edge of the business and understanding the sports business side of it because the money was undeniable. That there was so much money being spent in leagues and franchises were going. We're all of a sudden we're talking about $1 billion franchises. We're watching leagues get formed around the world, and trying to understand, how, and obviously lots of athletes like myself, the path was, if you were an athlete and if you didn't play professionally, you were either coaching or you were going to try to get into the administrative side of it, and maybe you go work for a Nike or a Converse back then, work for Gatorade and be on their marketing team. Anything that was kind of tied to sports, you try to find a way into that business. And now, college athletic departments are Fortune 500 companies. That's how they're run today. Obviously, a sports franchise, certainly a major sports franchise, is $1 billion business. You mentioned, we talked about sports commissions and facilities that are overseen by those organizations and what they need to do to fill them and to pay for them. That's no longer just a Convention and Visitors Bureau decision. That's a business decision. That's a financial decision. That's a CEO type decision. And we need to let people know, let students know, that when you go into and it's very attractive for a university that has an undergraduate sports marketing degree or has a business program that can lead you into that master's program, because now we've got kids playing 6-7 years in college.
Well, we went to a sport management minor specifically because they still get their business degree, but they're still an undergrad. One of the issues with some of the master's degrees, and I'm not discounting them, is that a lot of them think they're skipping steps.
Yeah.
And they're not realizing they actually have to do the other stuff, which is not just internships, but actually working hard and scrubbing seats and doing all the horrible stuff that nobody thinks. You don't think you have to do that because you get some pious degree.
That's right. I will remind every one of my students that when you want to get into the sports business, if you want to watch the game, buy a ticket. If you want to work in the business, you're not going to know. You could work an entire game. Whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's the NBA Finals, whether it's working at the Final Four. And we have a lot of our students that will be that were part of the internship program for the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and that will be doing the Final Four this year. And they all came back in that class and said, "You were absolutely right. I worked the Super Bowl. It was awesome. I was there. I don't remember a single play.
Exactly.
Because I was doing this or I was doing." You were there to make sure that the 80,000 people in the stands and the sponsors that are there and the teams that are there, you're there to put on the show. You're not there to watch it. And that's one of the things that they need to understand. And they do. And to your point, they need to go do those internships. We all started down there somewhere down on the totem pole. There's not a job when I was an executive in the sports space, working for a team, working for a property, and when I've got a staff underneath me, there's not a job that I would ask them to do that I already hadn't done myself and wasn't willing to do if they needed me to help them. And look, as with anything, there are people that do skip steps. There's a lot of people. There are a lot of organizations that have. That are family-owned businesses that have inserted family members into leadership roles, and it hasn't worked very well.
But that's the Peter principle. You can see, and
it happens everywhere.
I don't care if it's Hormel or whatever.
Yeah.
They can all have that, and nothing against Hormel. I don't know their business, but you know what I mean. Like even the one that nobody's considering. Incompetence can be a unicorn, but it certainly gets exposed at a certain point.
Absolutely, and in the sports business, you need to know your space, and I tell anyone that wants to get into it. Find an opportunity anywhere, whether it's if you wanted to get into coaching, start coach youth football, youth basketball, whatever. Just understand the culture and building a team and watching young athletes take coaching, get better, improve. Learn to manage people. Whether it's and whatever it is, or you go take that minor league job in somewhere, and you're not going to get paid a lot. But man, you learn a ton because they need you to do so many things. You learn tickets, you learn game ops, you learn sponsorship, you learn fan connection, you learn how to do, in-game entertainment. You're working with brands. You're working with your broadcast team. You get to do so many things at those levels, and then you find which ones you like. I mean, there are people that started in my class that thought they were going to be agents, and because I'm going to be Scott Boras someday. Okay, cool, man. You think Scott Boras just became Scott Boras? No, Scott Boras worked his ass off and got there. But they get into it and they go, man, I don't want to wait that long. But I was doing something and I realized I really like broadcasting, and I'm good at it, and I like covering games. And then next thing you know, they were working for doing an internship with Fox here, and then they said, hey, you need me to call some high school games? I'll go call a high school game. And then they were having fun. Then guess what? They built a tape. Then they sent it to a minor league team. They're like, hey, I like this young kid, got his good voice. Next thing you know, the kid's doing minor league baseball. Next thing you know, that kid's sitting in Major League Baseball right now as the number one guy for Fox. But he started down one path, went somewhere where he got exposed to multiple aspects of sports, decided that, well, I'm not going to go on that agent thing. That's a crapshoot. That's a long. Maybe that path is too long for me. But I caught a bug for this broadcasting thing, or you really like ticket sales, like you love that whole part of it, and you love the technology that's around it, and wanting to get involved in that, and maybe you go work for the ticket company, and then you're going around signing up stadiums and arenas and properties, and that's your gig. You sports now and these programs really have done a very good job of bringing the opportunities that exist in sports into their programs, and they've done that not with just professors, but the practitioners. And so a lot of the programs, I'm fortunate enough to work in the ASU program, and the reason that I'm there is because I'm out doing the work that we're talking about in our class. We bring in executives from the sports teams here to teach classes. We have people in our program and in our faculty that have done and are doing what is happening in sports today. So what our students are being taught, or what they're being, or what the people that they're talking to in class, whether it's their professors or the individuals that we have come in as guest speakers, they're the people that are doing the deals right now. These are and so we're not talking about, I had Tony Pantura come in and talk to my class, and Tony was the sports marketing legend. So we have a lot of very interesting stories to talk about in his AB days. But Tony is talking about what's happening in AB's world today. I mean, he's like, I'm not involved in it. But you can talk historically with someone like that. But our kids and our students, the ones you and I speak with on a regular basis, they are they're in the now, and so these programs have done a better job of transitioning into new things like NIL coming in, and we've got a lot of we're in a law program, so we obviously have a lot of law driven students and want to understand that, and it's a very important part of that. Contracts and legal parts of business are big, but it's also a very big part of what we teach in our program. But we also kind of have the ability to talk about that business side and bring in chief marketing officers, chief sales officers, CFOs for organizations, and talk about the financial side as well.
Well, Rob, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Enjoyed it. I think I had a great conversation with you.
Yeah, well, Troy,
appreciate
anytime.
it.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate you coming out, and anytime we can jump on, you just let us know.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Sports podcast, focusing on the world of sports business. Download our free iPhone, iPad app in the iTunes App Store, and Android app available in Amazon to listen to the entire archive. Or check out sportsdow.com for more podcasts, blog posts, and videos. All episodes of the Tao of Sports podcast are copyrighted and trademarked.